dear ones. You're listening to the What God Is Not podcast with Father Michael O'Loughlin and Mother Natalia.
Hello, listeners. This is Mother Natalia's Squirrel Cowboy giving the introduction for Father Michael's episode. In this episode, we speak with Father Nathan Symeon Adams and his wife, Pawnee Ali, about what it's like to be married Byzantine priests. You'll also get to hear the difference in how a father and a mother classify having children, whether it be by the date of the birth or the date of the conception. If you want to skip ahead because you don't like banter, jump ahead 11 minutes and 9 seconds from this point. But if you like the banter, it's all about Father Michael being mad we make fun of him.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to him forever.
Hello, we have two very special guests and two just special guests today. So,
which two are which?
Which two are which? So just our special guests, we're recording on the same day, by the way, that we recorded the Culture of Bears podcast. But we brought in one extra person and lost one extra person. So Mother Natalia, whatever your name is, are both here. I am having my first beer of the day. I've had 3 sips, I promise, nothing else. 3 sips of one beer. I had quite a few Red Bulls, though. Okay.
Cowboy
did that on purpose. Hopefully you all heard the beer open. Cowboy's been dreaming of this. This is a bucket list item of Cowboys to open a beer live on What God Is Not. So we have a Cowboy here who doesn't have a microphone. We took it away from him. We have Maddie here. We have to take hers away too, although there's no fear of her using it. Because we talked about fear the last time, but what we didn't say was that Maddie was not afraid at all of the escape room. She's very afraid of talking on podcasts. So we all have different fears. But then our very special guests today are Father Nathan Symeon Adams and his lovely wife, Ali Adams. Now the priest and Pawnee at Our Lady of Wisdom Byzantine Catholic Church, a Italo-Greek Catholic Church in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Whoop.
So come visit them, check them out, have them sign an autograph. You can take a selfie with them, etc. Now they're on the podcast.
Ali can't give blessings. Got way.
Buy the t-shirt.
But I'm really excited for this podcast because Ali's so worried about saying something we have to edit out.
I know.
That I'm just really
I know
excited.
I will. I just know I will.
I'm just excited trying to get you to say something that we have to edit out.
Especially because I'm drinking a beer.
I think Ali's having her first beer of the day too.
I hope so.
So, by the way, it's 6 a.m. here.
Exactly. Las Vegas time.
Just kidding. That was a joke.
It was a joke.
Yeah. It's not 6 a.m.
So we're out here visiting Father Nathan because he's been gone from the Proto Cathedral for a whole 6 weeks, and so we brought out a little crew to say hi and to visit. It's great seeing you guys.
It's a quick drive from LA. It's not far.
Yeah, it's only 4 hours from our part of LA. From Valeria's part of LA, it's only 3 hours because of traffic. But they also have 5 beautiful daughters between the ages of 3 and 13.
I would say Father Nathan
5
is
and 13.
5, what?
5. Molly's 5.
Molly's 5.
How old am I? Wait, but when you first arrived at the Proto Cathedral, she was 3
then, yes.
Okay.
That was 2 years ago, though.
Yes.
I'm paying attention to Sydney getting older, but I'm not paying attention to Molly getting older. That's funny.
And I think you're 44. You asked how old you were.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Did I?
You said how old am I?
I actually preached this in homily, and I got a little bit. You guys were there. We know Maddie wasn't there. Cowboy was, I'm sure. But I was like, I started off by saying, we can't, weaknesses in Christianity are good. My power is made perfect in weakness. I have a whole theology and developing one of weakness and how important weakness is.
You have a whole theology.
I do. I'm developing this whole theology of weakness because I think it's so incredibly important. And so we have parishioners, you know who you are if you're listening, who will mock public personas for simple weaknesses. Like if we have a public persona who is militantly pro-choice or just teaching something intentionally and adamantly against the teachings of the church and against Jesus Christ. Like, yes, we can mock them. There's a lot we can do because we're actually, something has got to change, and they're so entrenched in evil that you can do certain things, like Chesterton says and C.S. Lewis say we can mock the devil. There are certain ways of doing that. We got to be very careful with that. But anyway, but when people make fun of someone for very human weaknesses, I'm just like, because if it's a mental disorder or a stutter or like. I was saying, like, with Joe Biden.
Are you just looking at me to figure out something to make fun of me for?
I was just looking around the room, I promise. But like with Joe Biden, he just says the wrong thing. He'll say something like, what did he say? He said something like, many friends like me have cancer. And so he was saying he objectively said he doesn't have cancer. He misspoke.
Yeah.
And people were like mocking him relentlessly for this on social media.
Are you calling Father Nathan Symeon out for doing this to you?
No, he didn't. No.
About asking how old am I?
Yes. No, what I'm saying is, no. I'm saying don't make fun of Joe Biden for some simple human weakness, because we all have them, and we can actually use these for the glory of God. Mock him because he's incredibly pro-choice and calls himself Catholic. Like, yes, that's ridiculous. But for like misspeaking, so that's just a human weakness that we shouldn't mock someone for. I'm sorry, this makes me sound like horrible Father Nathan. Like,
unless it's funny,
right? And if the person, you're right. That's actually a really good point.
We should mock. I think that we can mock the contradiction without mocking him as a person. Like,
yes. And like Father Nathan and I know each other, love each other. So you can absolutely mock each other in ways that is not going to hurt them, Father Nathan's one of his favorite homily starts is saying how I misspoke. Like praying for I probably said this on the podcast already, but praying that someone to cease instead of going to a place of light. I said, send them, O Lord, to a plate of lice.
Plate of rice, right? Plate of lice. It was a plate of lice. You're right.
Even better.
One of the nuns recently was praying grace, the prayer before meals. And instead of saying, may their hearts find life, she said, may their farts hind life.
Hind life.
Yeah, I think though there's something important about.
Ali was worried she was going to be the one that needed edited.
There's something important about being able to not take yourself so seriously. Yes. But at the same time, I agree with you that it's important that we're not focusing on basically, here's what I like to tell folks and tell myself. I don't have a right to get angry unless the person's offended God.
Yeah.
And if we make that our moral judgment point, we'd all be doing a lot better.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. That also is a sign of a health that is uncommon these days. The ability to laugh at ourselves, or like I've said, the only times, I think I told Mother this recently, the only times I'm really sad, like I don't get sad that often. The only times I'm really sad is if somebody points out one of my weaknesses that I know I have.
You said that on the
wound,
podcast.
did I? And it's like a wound, and I go like that. I should not. It's my fault. I'm getting sad. It's my fault that I'm anxious or whatever, stressed out. It's my fault because I know this is a weakness, and as I grow in this and turn it into a virtue, then I objectively will not get sad anymore about that because I know I've grown from it. But if someone points out something that I know is a weakness of mine, it's been a wound, I have not been able to fix it yet, and they point it out again, that like sends me into like what's the term, struggle bus? Like, is that your thing, Mother? I think that's your thing.
It's one of the other nuns.
One of the nuns.
Does it. Yeah.
Like it sends me into like if I ever get anxiety, that's my anxiety. It's like, oh my gosh, I thought I could kind of deny that was the case with me, and it was just brought to the front again. A light's been shed on this thing that was kind of hidden in darkness for a while, and now the light's there. So I don't like it being out in the light. I don't like the fact that my weaknesses are being shown again, and people are realizing it again and bringing it up again. It's now in the light again. So there's a certain vice to that. So my own struggles at that time are my own fault. But so that's exactly it. Like, we can. I think, but what I've seen on social media was when people were talking about Biden that way, they were mocking him. Just to mock him, like to poke at his weaknesses. But you didn't see any like pro-choice Democrats doing that. not to say it was all people that didn't like him. They were finding
Right.
any reason to put him down.
Mocking like human frailties is certainly a sin. Thomas Aquinas actually has categories of what kind of mocking
Can we
is
just
permissible.
point out that Father Nathan Symeon just referenced Thomas Aquinas? That's just like really.
Well, I
great.
read things. I read books, and every once in a while I'll throw a little zinger out there. This is, by the way, I
I'm
just
sorry,
figured out
what
something.
what did Thomas Aquinas? I cut you off. I was so shocked.
He categorizes basically reasons you're allowed to make fun of people. And you're not supposed to make fun of basically human weaknesses. You're not supposed to have malice when you're making fun of people. But he does talk about that thing, what's it, eutropelia, where it can actually be helpful for correcting and for learning how to kind of take yourself a little less seriously and helping people through humor to come back to reality, which I do think is a helpful tool.
Absolutely.
At times. Because what is humor but paying attention to what is irrational that we do.
Yeah.
And so it's helpful to use humor to bring us back to reason, back to processing properly.
That's an interesting thing that would have helped for the last podcast, because in the same way that the ladies were screaming, we were laughing. And it is kind of the same. I wonder if like screaming and laughing actually kind of has the same.
Bet you.
There's something.
Maybe you guys cover your fear up with laughter.
Well, I brought that up at the beginning. I really, we weren't doing it because there was no fear. But I think you're right, and that we were maybe subconsciously trying to remind the ladies this isn't real.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
There was something about the irrationality of the whole thing that we had very different reactions to.
Yeah.
We're talking about an escape room, by the way.
Get ready, everybody. This is Culture of Bears Part 2.
Hey, I just figured something out.
Yes.
This is what you call banter.
Yes.
Because for the first like 5 minutes, or maybe it's been 10 minutes now,
Okay.
I've been thinking, what in the world does this have to do with a married priesthood? Suddenly I was like, oh, banter.
I think
Banter.
that was a great transition into our topic.
Yes,
Yeah?
there we go. Because we're over our self hoped for limit. Anyway, so one of our most requested topics on this, I would probably say one of the most requested topics on this podcast ever. And it
might even be the most requested.
It probably is. And I think this is because I'm sure the majority of our podcast listeners are Roman Catholic. I mean, we get like 3,500 downloads an episode, and there's barely that many Byzantine Catholics in the whole country, especially Athenians. So we have a lot of Roman Catholic listeners. And so the things like Eucharist for infants is always going to be a fascination. Married priesthood is another one, certainly a fascination. So we could certainly talk. We've had Father Joel Barstad on to talk about marriage. We've talked about him being a married priest. But I'd love to jump in with both of you here, Father Nathan and Ali, because I think Father Joel said that his wife would never come on. She's more like Maddie, just a little bit nervous about public and podcast.
I didn't really want to, but Father Mike talked me into it.
I just call him like, Ali, this is what we're doing. It's for the glory of God.
Also, Father Nathan and Ali are like two of my favorite people in the world. The part of the reason this whole trip started was because I was so sad that I wasn't going to see them on my retreat when I found out that they had been moved. That I was like, Father Michael, the day before my retreat is a feast day, so we have the day off. If Mother gives permission, can we just go visit Father Nathan and Ali before retreat, since I'm not going to see them? So
That's what we're doing.
yeah,
Love you,
so they're
Mother.
just like really great, and I'm excited to share them with everybody.
Amen.
The feelings are mutual.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you. Father Nathan and I have talked a lot about this, and I don't think we can actually make this podcast into this if you want, but we were able to work together for a year. And so at the Proto Cathedral St. Mary in Los Angeles, we had a married priest and a celibate priest. I had already been there a year and a half when they arrived. So the parish had never had a married priest before. This parish was founded in the late 50s. Never had a married priest before. So this was kind of a shock in that way, I think, to the people. But then, so they still had a celibate, and they were able to have a married man there as well. And people ask us all the time, what is the benefit of one over the other? I had somebody ask me the other day, so explain to me why the married priesthood is a good thing. And I said, I actually think the burden of proof is the other way around. In the East, the assumption is that it's a married priest in a parish. The celibates are going to be in monasteries, so there's community there. I belong to a community in Denver, the Companions of Christ, for a long time. In the East, celibate priesthood is certainly a new thing, and that aspect of leading a parish alone when you are celibate. When monks were made bishops, I know that was one of the main mourning that they had, was they had discerned monasticism. And so they had gone to live lives of celibacy, asceticism, in community with other men who honed their virtue through community life. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mother, but most women, when they're discerning monasticism, will say, like, what do you think the hardest part's going to be? Poverty, chastity, obedience. And they'll usually choose one, and then they get into community life. After a year, they're like, none of the above. It's community life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like the community.
The things that I thought would be the hardest things about, like, the not having a husband, not having kids, not like all of those things. It's hard. It's definitely hard sometimes, but it's much more so why are people still not rinsing their dishes? Like, we brought this up at every single community meeting. Like, it's those little things that grate on you day after day. So
in other words, I think my vocation, which at this point in my life is to be a celibate pastor of a parish, is kind of a unique thing in the East, certainly, but not in the U.S., where the vast majority of priests and parishes are run by celibates. But I guess I would love to hear.
Hold on, before you go on, I'm sorry. This sounds very fundamental, because it is. But I gave multiple talks recently, and I kept referring to celibacy. And then finally, at the end of some of the talks, someone asked, like, "What is celibacy? Can you just?"
So
I think
celibacy
it's obvious in the context,
just means not being married. So people misuse the word celibacy a lot nowadays, like especially on TV and sitcoms. They think it means I'm like taking a break from sex for a while. Like if someone says like they're dating, I'm gonna be celibate for a year. They mean just not sleeping around. But celibate actually just means not married. So a celibate priest is any, like, monks, nuns are all celibate, right? They're not married. They live a life of asceticism and cling to Christ in a sense. Through that asceticism, live the life of the cross.
And that would be like a vow for life when you make
exactly.
it.
Right, yeah.
Good question. So yes, celibacy is a vow in religious life, in monasticism, or a promise in current day priesthood. To that you're going to be unmarried for life. No spouse, no kids. Obviously a supernatural calling, empowered by God. But in the East, it's fundamentally a life of asceticism, a life of great sacrifice within community life to grow in holiness and live the life of the objectively, a life objectively ordered towards holiness and really nothing else. So obviously within vocation, there's various ways of doing this, but it's a life of martyrdom, of complete self-give. So thank you for that. But I would love Father Nathan, actually real quick, can you guys give us just a 5-minute, your vocation story from your first inklings of Christianity to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So it's
5 minutes, Father Nathan.
Yeah, I know. No, I can do this pretty quick because this is I've been forced to having to do that quickly.
You've taken up 20 seconds.
So
he's gonna ignore.
So at about 16, I came to the Lord. I was previously I studied with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Before that, I was an agnostic. And through studying the scriptures, I eventually started kind of realizing, well, Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong. They don't have an answer to a 16-year-old, so they clearly don't have this whole Christianity thing figured out. Meantime, Ali was raised through missionary parents, evangelical tradition, though she was baptized Catholic. About when I started serving the Lord, she was pretty, like maybe 6 months to a year after that, you really started trying to follow Christ. And she ends up going on a mission out to Fiji and New Zealand. She comes back. I head out to Australia, Samoa, New Zealand. And then we start talking on the phone and decide, let's go to Bible college, try to figure things out. So we go to Calvary Chapel Bible College, do that together. After the first year, we fall in love. go to England where we get engaged. We get married about 6 months later. And then I go to seminary, a Baptist seminary. Have big questions. Want to study philosophy to learn how to answer big questions. And so I go do a degree in philosophy and Reformed Theological Seminary in Florida. That's where we had, where we first got pregnant and had Sydney in 2009. We moved 2008. 2008 was the conception or the...
I guess that's when I birthed her.
So we get back 2009. That's married priest business, guys. So then we get back. We finish up the MDiv. I do another degree in patristics out at Nashotah House. Ali and I, we started going the Anglican track. Ali never became Anglican. She wasn't quite convinced I was done. So she was kind of like holding on for dear life.
Yeah.
And almost became Orthodox. And then in time, we met a group of monks, Holy Resurrection Monastery, and they became kind of my spiritual parentage.
We've had Father Maximus on the podcast before. He's from Holy Resurrection.
Yep. Father Maximus is my spiritual father. And certainly have to give credit to Abbot Nicholas as well. And what happens is we basically decide to become Byzantine Catholic. A big part of that is our desire to be in communion with all of the saints. And even if it's sometimes tumultuous situation, we want it to be in communion with all of the saints.
We studied together at the Anglican seminary for about 4 or 5 weeks before we made the decision to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ali went to Holy Resurrection Monastery with me.
Right.
And they were just so receptive to her and to me that she was ready to go after our studies. And so we packed up, we moved away from our last semester at the Anglican seminary, about 3 months before ordination. And we moved right next to the monastery for 6 months. And then we, from there, went and worked at the cathedral in Cleveland. And then I went to seminary. And then I was ordained 3 years ago. And so that, in short.
At which point did you conceive your other children?
There's no telling. Yeah, we don't have that all figured out. We can guesstimate.
2008, she was born, not conceived.
Yeah.
I'm just, or maybe, but
I don't think you're right.
I'm right.
Hold on.
He's looking at his ring.
This is my graduate
December
prom.
2008, she was born. So yeah, maybe back in the.
Okay, but this is my 2008 is my graduation ring.
Okay.
I thought he had like the birthdays of his
So did
children.
I. I was like, that's so
He has his graduation date on his ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was conceived, 10 months before December 5th. So still in 2008.
Oh, I'm not.
You were right. You were right.
I got corrected by a parishioner.
Right.
I had a parishioner that there are only 3 children. All were born in December. And I was like, Valentine's babies. And she's like, no, Father, St. Patrick's Day babies. So I go, okay. Sorry. All right. So thank you for that. It's actually, I wanted you to do that because it's a fascinating story and a movement from agnosticism through many different kind of increasing in orthodoxy up till.
Yeah, I wish I could do more justice to the story because just talking about degrees that I went through doesn't really do a whole lot. But that, in short, is
Amen.
part of the process.
Yeah.
Like it's a way of telling the story which has some meat to it. But there are certainly much deeper spiritual, theological questions.
Maybe
that
you
were
can come back on
part of
sometime
that.
Yeah, so many people,
story.
along the way who just embraced us and taught us and helped us along the way, I'd say. The monks being big in that in the beginning.
So if you were to give I mentioned the word TED Talk earlier, and you didn't know what that was. TED Talks are like 20-minute videos on YouTube where people kind of give a under 20-minute presentation on their favorite things relating to technology, entertainment. No, what is it, Maddie? But it is. But
He's
what
trying to figure out what
TED
stands for.
technology.
Cowboy's going to look it up.
Engineering and
Engineering?
I think it's technology engineering design.
People are yelling at their computers right now, and it's usually Cowboy doing this. But since he's looking it up, he can't. This is a total squirrel. This is a total Perla. We're going to report back in 1 minute. But it's people talk about whatever they want to, like the most passionate thing for 20 minutes. So I would love your not 20 minutes, but what is it, Cowboy?
Technology, entertainment, and design.
Technology, entertainment, and design is what TED stands for. But the what is at the heart of your? Now you've been a priest 3 years. You've been in 3 to 4 different parish situations in those 3 years. How does your priesthood affect your marriage and family life, and how does your marriage and family life affect your priesthood? Particularly
emphasizing the areas of technology, entertainment, and design.
Well, that's going to be rough. There's a lot to say on this. Mm-hmm. I was telling Father Mike that I got a phone call the other day where someone said, Father, could you tell me kind of the benefits and maybe the problem areas in being a married priest? And I said, I could take you through, and I did. And I said, here is where being a married priest is easier. Mm-hmm. Here's where it's harder. Here's where it has a benefit. Here's where it doesn't have benefit. And most every time, it's the same kinds of things that are both helpful and unhelpful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let me just give you an example. I was out here for a month on my own while my family was back in LA. Right.
Oh, that must have been weird.
It was totally weird.
Bachelor for a month.
It was totally weird, but it was really easy to be a priest. Uh-huh. Really easy. Uh-huh. Because I could completely focus on the parish. Mm-hmm. And so it was simple, really simple.
And then come home and not have all the...
Not come home and it's easy. You just come home and, all right, what do I do now? Well, I just do whatever I want. I mean, I'm done. I worked all day. And I worked all day. No, never. Now I have to backtrack. No, I'm just kidding. I have no problem with that, but that's not my particular thing. So I come, I thought, boy, this is really easy to pray. It's easy to meet with people. It's easy to go out of my way. And so being a celibate for a month, right? You just learned that's an improper use of the terminology.
We know what you mean.
Pretending to be a celibate for the month, it made the priesthood much easier. However, that can be very self-deceptive, because that means that I wasn't experiencing what my people are typically experiencing on a day-to-day. Mm-hmm. That means that when I'm worn out and tired, I get to go home and just focus on me time. Mm-hmm. That's not what most of our people are doing. They're not allowed to do that, right? And so having a family has this way of forcing you to grow up. It has a way of forcing you to get over yourself, not just when you want to get over yourself, but it demands you get over yourself without qualifications. So you can see the very same thing that is a benefit to the celibate could also be a downfall for the celibate. Mm-hmm. And the very same thing that's a benefit for the married guy could be a downfall for the married guy. Because on the contrary, what that means is that if the married guy gets overwhelmed with household responsibilities or difficulties in life with his family, they could easily neglect the parish, right? And so I think this is really a relevant conversation to consider, because if I interpret 1 Corinthians chapter 7, which, by the way, is where St. Paul talks about it being preferable to be unmarried. And by the way, he's not just talking about the priesthood. He's talking about for everybody there in that passage. I think Paul's really being practical. He's talking in a particular context, which is under persecution from the empire. And he's saying, how can I really do this gospel thing really well? And he's saying, well, it's really hard to be a married person at this time. You already get a preview of this in the Gospel of Matthew, right? Where he talks about the end. I think it's Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus talks about, woe to the woman who's pregnant during this time. She should flee to the mountain, right? Well, this is a preview of the eschatological world that the early church was going through. St. Paul, most theologians would agree, believed that the end was on the brink at any point. And so St. Paul is saying it's better not to be married because then you can focus on the gospel. Otherwise, you're going to be focused on your wife. You're going to be focused on your family, how you can keep them alive during this tribulation, right? So I think Paul was very practical. And when he talked about why you should or should not be married, it was not an issue about the priesthood. Paul didn't have in mind the priesthood there. He was talking about any Christian should really think about this question: being married, not to be married. Why? Because we want to make sure we're focusing on the gospel. Can you really do that well in the context of our current climate, right? And so, answering this question about the priesthood from a practical grid, I think, is the most biblically responsible way of doing it. And so this question can be asked at different times in different situations with different answers, all based on the contextual perimeter we're actually working within, right? And so that may be the thing that I'd want to emphasize in talking about the practical benefits or the benefits of being a priest as married or as an unmarried priest, right? What are the real practical realities to it?
And I want to, if we have time for this, I want to talk about it. If not, we'll do it some other time. But I think the practical is a very good place to go. And I think the question for celibate priests and pastors like me would be, then like, what is the hard part? And it is the, if you would spend 6 months without your wife and girls,
right,
it would have been a lot harder, and you probably would have said, I have all this time to do all these things, but like there's something, I'm not doing it as well because I don't have my wife and my daughters here to live this normal life that is obviously going to be something that is allowing me to have the confidence, the wherewithal, the holiness to actually serve my people. And so I wonder with me, what is, there's obviously the struggles of celibacy could be debilitating to my ministry as a celibate. I hope they're not through my not semi, but my desire for a certain monasticism that comes with living celibacy. There is a certain, it could be debilitating as just saying I'm lacking something. I am lacking the practical about learning how to love and to mature and to grow up and to like be called out when I don't want to be called out and not have a certain freedom that I do have as a celibate, but that can actually be debilitating. And you, like, as Mother and I have talked about many times, like there's still a lot in me that just wants a wife, wants a companion, wants someone to love most, wants someone to love me most, wants children to help raise and to have them grow in the faith. And the way that I think the men who I've known personally who have left the celibate priesthood, they left the priesthood to get married. Like that was debilitating for them. There was something so lacking in their life that they could not focus, they could not function, they could not serve, they could not do that because they were lacking these common goods that God offers to them. They didn't accept it. I think the practical is a great place to go, especially scripturally. I like how you explain that, Father Nathan. And I just wonder if I've been very happy in my celibacy, thank God, for 18 years now. But what does it look like to have that be actually?
I almost made a joke, but he's been a priest for 20 years.
Yeah.
That was the same number
for
of
17 years, including diaconate.
Yeah.
But so yes, so I guess that would be thinking as from the celibate point of view. That would be, in what ways is the ideal you saw for a month not the continuing ideal? But in all honesty, I'm saying that because I think it is for me. I mean, my life is very much like what yours was for a month. Thank God I'm just a happy guy. And I love...
He's a happy guy.
A guy that can like serve in that way. And God has given me that gift. And I pray that it continues. But anyway, I want to throw that out there as kind of a reflection upon that.
So let me just get this straight. So, and by the way, that was really good. Just what Father Mike just said was a bit humbling for me because I of course it's true. I was only pretending to be a celibate for a month. I don't know what the long-term experience would actually be like. And just a quick little kind of shout out there. Father Jason Sharon once said that the greatest temptation for a married man is to be a celibate, and the greatest temptation for a celibate is to be a married man.
Yeah.
So we have not long-term experienced either of each other's struggles in the direct way. Certainly, us being together and having conversation, we're aware of some of those struggles from a secondhand experience, but not directly. So that's a fair point. Okay, now can I understand your question a little more clearly here?
Yes.
Are you telling me to try to convince you that you, of all the goods you could have had, if only you were a married priest? Is that what you're asking me to do?
You know, I think that honestly, the fact that you were married so long before you got ordained a priest, and the fact that I discerned celibacy in the beginning of my discernment in a Roman Catholic context, because I discerned at University of Steubenville when I was living a Roman Catholic life, even though I was attending a Byzantine parish every once in a while, that there was still, I think, a rootedness and a foundation that you and I have. But I did discern married priesthood, intentionally discern it, and they've all heard that story. So I don't know if, because I think it's true what Father Jason said. Like, there's certainly my core. If somebody said, "What are you lacking, Father? What are you lacking?" I would probably say something related to I'm lacking a wife and kids. Like if I had to find the core of my poverty, if you will, the core of my poverty is a wife and children, is married life with family. And I wonder if the core poverty of someone who's married, men and women, would be how different my life would be if I didn't have this family and children. And I'm thinking how different my life would be if I had family. Like it's more different than I live in LA. What if my life was if I lived in, on the peninsula in Norway and ran a lighthouse? Like, my life would be more different if I had a wife and kids in LA than it would be if I lived in Norway and ran a lighthouse. Like, my marriage and family status is like the biggest thing in my life that I say that's a difference. And that's something that is a certain poverty that I've embraced and I love, and I'm living it out, I hope, particularly well. But I'm wondering if that's what Father Jason was saying. I wonder if the same thing could be said. I'm looking at you too, Ali, because it's like family, spouse and family is kind of the foundation of everything. So therefore celibacy is too. And so we live out everything on top of that, including mission and vocation and parish life, built on that foundation.
I think that's fair to say. I think that's fair to say that the busyness of life for a married person, especially with children, not just a married person, but especially with children, it does get difficult at times not to have that personal time, that time to pray. I mean,
right. It's always there. As soon as you wake up, I think Jordan Peterson said something like, you haven't fully grown up until you've had children, but he said there's exceptions to that rule. But you wake up, your kids are hungry. Before you think of yourself, you have to think of your kids, and your kids want this and they want that. And so it's a constant giving of yourself up for the sake of your children and your spouse. But it matures you in a different way, the giving of yourself up, the constant giving up of yourself for another person. It takes you to a level with God, I think, that is difficult to get to without children.
But also, wouldn't you say that there's a sense in which you lose something?
You lose something
because you don't have the time to focus on yourself.
Right.
Or what I mean by that is you don't have time to. I have to get up at 4:30 if I want to pray and read books, right?
God, yeah.
And I'm in a different situation than you because I actually get to go to a church every day and spend time here. But for you wake up and you're on the go, and so you lose that time to pray.
You do.
If you're not on the ball. You got to be on the ball.
You do.
In other words, you lose your time to pray. You lose your only time to read.
I took it last night at midnight because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get it in the morning. And at midnight, I woke up and read, My Only Friend is Darkness, the book that we talked about.
Oh, Barbara Dent.
Yeah.
So good.
Because I knew I needed some deep time with God, and it wasn't going to be there in the morning for me, but I could get it in the middle of the night. So yes, you have to
only change. Yeah,
right.
so you do lose quite a bit
do.
there. And another point of reference, and this I got this from you, but now I've also gotten it from plenty of other moms. A lot of women who have babies lose the kind of joy they once had in the divine liturgy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like what that was like?
You can't focus the way that, and if your husband's a priest,
That's what I was going to
he's
say.
not
Like
with
not
you.
just a mom with a baby in
Right.
the liturgy, a mom with a baby in the liturgy whose husband is not there with
Yes.
her. Like you're at the altar.
Right. And when Nathan's at the altar, Nathan's not mine. I don't consider him mine. He's there. He's God's in a much more real way than all the time being God's. He's God's. And it's me and the kids, and you can't concentrate. You're trying to make sure that they concentrate, that they're getting something out of it. And it's difficult to really zero in. So yeah, that makes it hard. And you sometimes want to just go by yourself, or you want to just give your kids to the lady that's sitting on the pew behind you. It's hard. You're having to train them in the ways of the Lord as you train yourself in the ways of the Lord. And it's very difficult.
Can I ask, Father Michael, I know this is your episode, but can I ask two questions to Ali? Because I think these are the things that a lot of our listeners are going to be wondering. So one is that when people talk about the married priesthood in the Eastern churches, they'll often make the comparison. I've made this comparison myself of being married to a priest is similar to, like, I grew up with a dad in the military, right? And so he'd be on 6 or 9 month deployments, and so like often the mom is kind of like a single mom, being married to a firefighter or a police officer, like someone who could just be called away at any moment for a sick call, and that's all. I think that's accurate to an extent, but I want to hear your thoughts on there's something unique to being married to a priest that you don't have with like military or firefighters or police of you're also called to like a spiritual presence to the people as the priest's wife. And like you're a mother to the parish in a way, in the sense that Father Nathan is a father to the parish. And so I'd like your thoughts on that, like that unique aspect of the vocation of being a priest's wife. Because this very much was a vocation that you discerned together, right? And that's emphasized in our churches. Like a man is not accepted into priestly formation if his wife is not on board in our formation, because it's like,
that was one of the beautiful things about going through seminary is they involved me in such a bigger way than the previous seminaries had involved me. I'm sorry to say that for the Protestant seminaries, but I never knew the teachers, I never knew the professors, I didn't know anybody, but at St. Cyril and Methodius, I knew the teachers. I was going in and sitting in on the classes. I knew everybody, and the bishop was coming over to our house. Ali, are you on board with this? Are you okay with this? So that was really big for me to feel like they needed me to be on board for them to be on board.
So I'd like to hear from you about that, like this aspect of what's unique to being a priest's wife as opposed to just being married to like someone who's always on call. But then also I think that in some sense y'all have the advantage that a lot of our married priests don't have of like coming from a Protestant background. It's not uncommon to have a married pastor, right? Like that aspect of it is very normal.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know if you can think of something, Ali, like we asked both of our parents this when Father Michael and I had our parents on the podcast, like what's been a surprising grace from the vocation as a priest's wife? Like what's been something that you feel your family
I can evangelize. As soon as I say I'm married to a priest, people are like, what? Married to a priest? First, they're a little bit scandalized, and then I get to explain to them, what we are and what that means. And it just creates an instant relationship. I can talk to them about why I'm married to a priest and what that means. And so it's really made a way for me to evangelize wherever I go. Something that was big for me in seminary, saying to the new gals coming in, is you just have to let him go. You have to release him to God, whatever that means. That might mean he's not there for bath time at night. He's not there for dinner time. He's not there when you want him there at those times when you're like, these are the times I need you there, honey. He just might not be able to be there because you're giving him to God. And in that, you're giving him to the people. So I think you have to come into it with an openness to give up your husband when necessary. And that I think there is a grace to that. There's times where God just says to me, no, just not now. Not now. It's not the time. He's mine right now. So for me, that's my relationship with Christ when he has to speak to my heart and say, not right now. I need him right now. And there's a grace there that I'm able to give him up in that, and God helps me in whatever I thought that I would need him in. But being open to giving him up at all times and when necessary, when God asks, has been big for me.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, one thing I wanted to say, both when you were talking, Father Nathan, and you now, Ali, I think so often when we have these discussions in the U.S. about married priests versus celibate priests, we always emphasize, like, what do we do with our freedom? What do we do with our strength? You know, is people always ask, well, how does a married priest serve in a parish? They don't have time. That's always the question. You know, they rarely ever ask, how does a celibate live alone? You know, without anybody's feet to wash, right? Basil says, who without anybody's, who's, what's the phrase?
When his disciples asked him whether he thought it was better to be a hermit or to be in the cenobitic life, in other words, to live in community, when asked which of those was better, he said, if you live alone, whose feet will you wash? Yeah.
So there's, we always talk about the time and like the practical things, like you said, Father Nathan. But I wonder, I've always been fascinated by some translations of the widow's mite, because Jesus says, be like her, she gave from her lack. So I think there's something, and he says, she's given more than all those others. Like, there's something about giving from our lack that I think is the more Christian way to do it. So if we're only talking about the who has more time, who has more peace of mind. A celibate has more time, but a married man may have more peace of mind if the celibate didn't discern or is not prayerful enough or doesn't have priests that he has some sort of sense of community with, that there may be a lack of peace of mind. But I wonder if one of the beauties of this is to lean into the poverty aspect. If we lean into what we are lacking, then we can actually give from that place. I thought of this, especially when you were talking, Ali, like the gift of you giving your husband to God and God's people at those moments and allowing Christ to take him and actually seeing grace in that. Like you're being like the widow. You're giving from your lack, certainly from your abundance, because your husband, you have certainly, we all know this, very much of an abundance in your life with your beautiful family, things like that. But you're also giving from your lack. And when we are, what do they say? If you want to get something done, give it to a busy person to do, right? Because if they're busy, they can get it done. They know how to get things done. They often do that. They can get a lot done. The same thing is true for if you have a man or a woman who is able to give themselves a lot. They give themselves a lot to a lot of different things that they are able to give from their lack, and Christ empowers their poverty to be very beneficial. And so
if they allow it to be.
Right.
Like, that's the beautiful witness of what Ali's saying is the poverty, the ache, the lack becomes for her, when she allows it to be, a place of encounter.
Yes.
As opposed to a place of despair. Like,
he becomes to me what Nathan can't be during that time. He becomes my husband.
Which is
celibacy.
Which is, well, that's what I was about to say. Like, that's actually, I'm sorry, I just cut you off, Father Michael, but I'm not sorry enough to let it go back to you, though. It's beautiful because it's like, we talk about how as monastics, we're meant to be the reference point for all Christians. And I think, like, you're living out that monastic truth. Like, you're the witness to the married people that we can't bring our our infinite needs to the finite being that we're married to. Like, I'm not married to a finite being, but like, you're witnessing to that, to all of the married couples in the parish and all the married couples that you encounter, that like, because in fact, if you were to bring those needs to your husband, they would be crushing to him. And you would be disappointed, right?
Yes.
And that's the truth for all of us. But when you're not married to a priest, you're not married to someone in the military, you're not married to a police officer, it's like easier to self-deceive. And like, God doesn't even allow you that self-deception. And so anyways, that's just a really beautiful witness.
Any thoughts, Father Nathan, on any of that? Or if the Spirit's leading you in a different direction?
No, I think that's a good point. Being a married priest, God does not allow very much self-deception. That is very true. Very true. Because you'll go through struggles with a family, with marriage, just like any other married person, maybe even more because there's more stresses. With a family, with kids, with extended family, with you're dealing with your own issues. You're dealing with the difficulties of life, and so there's no opportunity to kind of not everybody's the same, but certainly in my own experience, what I can say is you might go, okay, well, I just want to be happy. I just want to have, just enjoy the benefits and fruits that everyone else gets to experience whenever they want. And God oftentimes goes, no, you're going to experience what it's like to give yourself, right? My favorite icon is the extreme humility of Christ, right? And it's one where, and again, I'm speaking out of my own experience. God just continually goes, this is kind of where I want you at, right? And I can go, God, but I want to be able to laugh and like everyone else gets to laugh all the time. Like I want to be able to be happy all the time. Like everyone else gets to be happy all the time. And sometimes God just goes, no, that's not what I have for you. Like that's not the part of my son that I have in mind, particularly for you to manifest. As much as that is your nature, by nature, I'm a pretty like I joke a lot. People say that I can never be serious at times, right? Because I'm just constantly playing around.
Sorry, can you explain the icon of extreme humility? Just a lot of our listeners won't be familiar with that.
The icon of extreme humility it's the image of Christ after he's been crucified and taken down, and his face is rather lifeless, and so it's the extreme humility that God the Son, the human God the Son, not the divine. Don't want to get called out for heresy or something. Has given his complete life, that he's completely emptied of all lifeliness. Right? That's you see that and you go, God did that for us. He gave everything for us, and so certainly I can't. I just noticed that I can't get away from that image from God, that he seems to constantly be bringing it back to my mind and working on my own deficiencies there, right? And a life of marriage and children is by far the easiest road towards that for me. And so that is you could say a benefit, right? Because it's the economy of God for my salvation, or one could see that as a negative, maybe you could, you would be, you'd find a life a lot easier if you did not have to have those considerations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I certainly would not. For me personally, I would not mimic that icon. I would not be like that icon if I didn't have those experiences with family. And so there is a sense for me in which, God definitely uses married life and children to remind me, like, I'm not allowed to be self-deceived about this life and about how quickly it's passing, and that death is just around the corner. I can never be tricked about that. It's always at the forefront of my mind and my imagination. So that's true.
It's definitely the case where on the days, and I know if Carolina's listening, Carolina's like my helps in the parish with administrative assistant, like making sure that I have a to-do list, get everything done, because that's not my specialty. But like the days where I don't touch my to-do list, because my ministry was drawn out of me by people, like I didn't plan it, I didn't intentionally do it. From the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, it was just putting out fires. And like, okay, I'm dealing with ministry all day long, have no time to plan, nothing is intentional. Those are some of the best days of ministry. And I imagine that's what it's like to be a parent. It's like literally I plan the day and I get my kids to school, I get them home, I get them fed, but like what the day's going to bring as far as what their needs are, what the themes in their heads are, and what they're going to want from me at the time and the energy, like that's just pulled out. They define what that is, not me. And of course there needs to be wisdom. We need to kind of give some sort of guidance and structure and order and being responsible. But I imagine that's kind of, again, going back to the widow's mite, and we give from our poverty. I think we are earthen vessels. We are grains of wheat cracked open, or life comes through. The way of any criticisms of married priesthood don't understand that. They don't understand that a man who can give himself completely to his wife and kids can also give himself completely to the parish, can also give himself completely to God, because it is out of the lack, out of the poverty, out of the Christ's grace that comes from that death to self. That's where grace is passed out to others, spread out to others. I really do think any time that a priest complains about being too busy. Now, we're all busy, but when we complain about being busy, we're actually deceiving ourselves about, where we're putting our energies. Are we being wise and responsible? Are we? And I do it. I'm weak in that way, because I don't always see that my busyness is a good thing, but I also don't always see that my exhaustion is of God, and it probably is. So but there's something about, if we saw the way that grace flowed from us when we were not in control, when we were lacking, when our ministry was being drawn out of us, rather than when we were being intentional about it, I think we would see that the benefits of God's work, his hand, his voice, is actually more fruitful if we're broken open and weak than if we're somehow planning our own aspect and our own role in the kingdom of God.
Because when it's being drawn out of us, we can be confident that it's him and that it's not us, right? It's the I must decrease so that he may increase. Yeah. And I think that there's this beautiful parallel between the married life and monasticism of what comes just very naturally to marriage. A lot of those things are chosen intentionally in our monasticism. So I'm thinking of just the fact that, like, we have vigils and we have fasting and we have all of these like intense ascetic practices that just come from, like, Ali, there are certainly times that, like, I've seen you like get lunch for your kids and you're just so focused on getting all of their plates together that at the end it's like, oh, you finally get food too. And so it's like you have to set aside your hunger in order to just care for your children. And I can't imagine how many times it's like you've had to just skip meals because you're just so focused on providing for them. Right. Or
but I don't want to have it go without being said that when you leave your family for the sake of Christ, he provides family wherever you go. And in each church that we've gone to, he's provided the aunts, the uncles sitting around this table are aunts and uncles, and we've had the grandparents and people brought into their lives. Mm-hmm. So when you leave for him, for the sake of him, he just gives a whole lot more where you thought you wouldn't have, where that would be gone.
Yeah.
And that is truly a blessing that my children have been so loved by so many people.
And the same is true for monastics, of just like God provides in abundance for like he can't be outdone in generosity. Right. We talk about this all the time.
I think one of the difficulties in this conversation, not just this one, but the bigger cultural conversation of monasticism and versus the married life is that we want to make these ontological categories, right? In other words, like categories of separation between like perfection and non-perfection and better and less good, and these kinds of conversations are the things that tend to drive the way we talk, and it really is really a shame. Because we're not Gnostics, and God created this whole universe with the purpose of fulfilling the same end, right? Of glorifying Him and perfecting us in the image and likeness of His Son. And so, really, and this is why I'm going back to my previous statement. This really needs to be a conversation about what's most practical for fulfilling the end that God has created us towards, right? How am I going to attain holiness? How am I, as an individual with particular needs, with a particular algorithm of life, who's very unique and unlike anyone else, going to be transformed into the image and likeness of Christ? And if we answer questions along those lines, and not with regard to this strange cultural conversation about who's better and who's worse, and how can I be superior or less superior? I mean, how have I taken the lower road? This kind of way of processing, it's not healthy. It's not healthy for those who are taking the superior road, or who are taking the lesser road because they don't think that they're holy or something. That's really, it's not healthy. I don't think at a psychological level. I don't think it's healthy at a theological level. I really think we just need to be having serious discernment about how am I going to be, how is God going to help me to attain to the likeness of His Son? Like
specifically Nathan Adams.
Yes.
Yeah.
How is Nathan Adams, right? How is Cowboy? How is Father Michael? How is Ali? How are we going to be made holy? And we know this more by our real life circumstances, not some kind of like Gnostic fantasy where we're dislocated from the history that God has placed us in, right? It's not going to do any good to fantasize about being in a different life, or fantasize about if only I could be up in a mountain and separated from the difficulties of my life, or if I could be with a family. These are delusions, right? The fathers continually warn against these kinds of delusions. We're really called to be firmly rooted in the real life situation that God's placed us in. And Ali can testify, this is a hard one for me because I am by nature a future projector. I am constantly looking into possibilities and into the future. There's a reason I've been to four different seminaries. Right? There's a reason I'm now pursuing a pontifical degree. I'm constantly changing and doing different things and updating my thinking and thinking big ideals, right? But this is a conviction, what I'm saying. It's not necessarily all of my life experience of what I've actually done. But it is a conviction of mine that I, Nathan Adams, and I think all of you too, need to be right here present in this historical reality and think from there. How am I going to be made holy? That's all that matters at the end.
Amen. Do you have any final thoughts, Ali, Father Nathan?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Sorry.
Please.
Okay. This is going back to what we said in that previous podcast about bears or whatever it was, the culture of bears.
The culture of bears, yeah.
Yeah. So this thing about Father Mike had brought up about his best days are sometimes those days where parishioners overwhelm him, right? In short.
Yeah.
And
Parishioners and spiritual children. Let's put that out there.
we don't oftentimes have the same experience as parents, right? If you're going to find very few parents who are going to go, today was awesome. My kids kept me from getting anything done. Well, I think part of that is that it goes back to this cultural commentary, which goes, well, you're just a parent. You're not a monastic. What you're doing is not really for God. Like, yeah, it is for God, right? Like, but you're enjoying family and kids and you have all the benefits. I think that's totally false way of looking at it. That passage that I quoted earlier where St. Paul says that a woman is saved through childbearing, right? That is the theosis of a mother. And they should be thoroughly encouraged that they've picked the best possible road for themselves that God would want them on to attain their salvation. And so the only way that can be a joyful operation when kids take away from all of the things in the day and you don't get anything accomplished is if we are genuinely convinced with all of our heart that the vocation that God has given us is in fact dying to ourselves for the benefit of the gospel, for our salvation, that what we're doing is holy and pleasing before God, and he accepts it on his altar, right?
And that the more you give of yourself, the more he gives of himself to you, I would say. Yeah.
And that what you're doing is just as holy as what a priest is doing. That what you're doing is just as much a part of the sanctification of the world as what a monastic is doing. If we understand what the mother's role is as less significant spiritually as a monastic, I think we're making a major mistake. We're not thinking about this accurately. That's not the reality. That's not the practical scenario. Practical reality. We're all being sanctified through the precise means that God wants to sanctify us. And we should not be trying to fantasize and get out of what God has placed us in. So firmly rooted in reality, trust that God is sanctifying.
Amen. All right, thank you both. That was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
That was
Our listeners are going to be so happy.
That was more spirit-led than I hoped for, so thank you. I thought that went very, very well. So I'm going to give a quick spiel about where people can find us online and things like that, and then we'll each do prayer intentions. Yes, you forgot last time, Mother.
Thank you for announcing that.
And then we'll do quick prayer intention for each of us, including Maddie and Cowboy, and then Father, if you could give a blessing at the end, like you did last time too. All right. So thank you all for listening. You can find us on all the platforms, but we'd love if you could rate and recommend us and comment on Apple Podcasts. We are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I'm on Twitter at Padre Michael O. We have a Goodreads where you can see what we're reading and you can share what you're reading and have a conversation with our media team. We're also on YouTube, but audio only. We have a website, whatgodisnot.com. We also have a nonprofit where we support evangelization of the world, other projects, and the poor, the hungry, thirsty, strangers, naked, ill, and imprisoned. That's votina.org. You can support us on our Patreon to give monthly to support this mission of this podcast and the other missions that we have. And I think that is everything. That's all. Votina.org, I think I mentioned. And then that. Patreon, I mentioned that too. Okay, I think that's everything. So we'll ask to go around the table and give some prayer intentions. I am going to ask, we have, just pray for the seminarians of the Eparchy of Phoenix. We have some that are dating, some that are married, and some that are celibate. We actually have all three within our eparchy right now. So please pray for all those who are discerning the various vocations, especially in the eparchy, and I'll say the eparchy of Parma as well, because Mother's in the eparchy of Parma technically. But just pray for all seminarians who are discerning and those who are discerning marriage and celibacy both.
Not even
monastic life.
Not even technically. I just am Eparchy of Parma.
She is the Eparchy of Parma, technically and otherwise. Mother, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for prayers for single mothers, because I think that there's a lot of similar struggles to what Ali was sharing of like being the wife of a priest, and just that they can be open to similar graces to what she was sharing, and to open those struggles up to be places of encounter with the Lord instead of places of distress or despair.
I'd actually like to pray for Allie's parents and siblings and Father Nathan's mom, that the struggles they have in this unique but beautiful priest and marriage life bring all of them together to Christ.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask for prayers just for my family in general, my parents, my brothers, and my sister-in-law.
And your niece.
And my niece, Charlotte.
I'm going to ask for prayers for my 2 eldest daughters starting school, and just the kind of identity crisis going on in junior high and high school, and that they would be able to be a light where they're at. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll pray. My intention is for celibate priests to be aware of the temptation to the desire to be married, and vice versa, that the Lord would
Watch
guard
yourself.
and vice versa, that married priests would not be tempted to be celibate priests.
Confidence and peace in your vocation.
Confidence and peace in the vocation.
Right. Father, bless.
Okay. May Christ, our true God, have mercy on us and save all of us. May he continually make his will known to us, not through revealing it all at once, but by unfolding his presence and the real life experiences of our day-to-day lives. May we humbly accept the circumstances that he places us in, and may we joyfully receive them as the means of our salvation, as a lifeboat by which he will take us through the storm of this life. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.